spotlighting Hawaii's leaders.
We want to bring in Governor David Ige.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Lieutenant Governor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Mayor Derek Kawakami.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Spotlighting the issues.
Where is the virus right now in our community?
How much is this overall going to cost the state?
How are you responding to the community's concerns? Talk about the level of citations that you guys are writing.
Spotlight Hawaii with Yanji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Longstrugs.
Aloha, thank you so much for joining us here on this Wednesday on Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Yanji Denise, joined by Ryan Kalei Suji. And Ryan, today we head over to the Hawaii State Capitol.
That's right. We're catching up with Hawaii Governor David Ige. We have a variety of issues to talk to. Good morning, Governor. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Yanji. It's always great to see you.
You know, as I mentioned, there are a lot of things we want to discuss, everything from your veto list going to Red Hill, COVID-19. But we want to begin with the announcement that was made yesterday about public schools and mask wearing. The announcement was made that the mask wearing would be optional for parents to decide whether or not to have their children wearing masks in school when school resumes once again in just a few months, or next month rather. With what we're seeing and the threats of this new variant BA.5, how do you feel about the decision that was made by the department, and do you support it?
Yeah, I do think, as Ryan, we are migrating through this how to live with COVID and getting schools back to normal to not require masks, I think, is just another one of those steps. We are seeing across the country, CDC is changing their guidance to provide more options and discretion about whether masking is required. I do think that, we want parents to be smart and be aware that COVID is still in our community. We encourage, especially now that all children are eligible for vaccinations, once again, we would encourage everyone to get vaccinated and boosted if they're eligible, because that really does make a difference. And we are going to where masking will be optional at our public schools. And we do know that there may be situations, if there is a cluster, an outbreak on a school campus, that there may be a need to reinstitute masks on a case-by-case basis in different situations. But overall, it will be optional next year.
What's interesting is that not only has the mask requirement been lifted, but the quarantine protocols are changing too. It used to be that if you were exposed unmasked in a classroom setting, you'd have to quarantine that class for 5 days. They're getting rid of that as well. This comes at the same time the White House briefing this morning is encouraging boosters, is encouraging, as you just did, is encouraging mask wearing as well. So it just feels like there is a disconnect between what the federal government is telling us to do and what the Department of Education has decided.
No, Yanji, I can assure you that the Department of Education is working with the Department of Health, who is in constant communication with the CDC and the federal agencies. We do know that they are working on revised guidance for schools in general. And the new announcement is in line with what the CDC will be announcing, or changes that we anticipate for the next school year. So, there is a lot of discussion and conversation. We are trying to migrate to live with COVID, and part of that is allowing parents to make decisions about their children. Once again, it is different this year than it was last year, in the sense that all children 3 months or 6 months and older do have the option of being vaccinated, and we certainly would encourage all parents to vaccinate their children.
We want to bring in a question here. Heidi asking, how will the hospitals handle the predicted increase with BA4 and BA.5? This is the variant, of course, that we talked about at the top of the show that is spreading across the country. And we're seeing those hospitalizations nationally go up because of this new variant. Your thoughts about this variant, the threat that it poses, and what communication you've had with the hospitals about their capacity right now and moving forward, looking ahead to this new variant?
Yeah, Ryan, we are definitely concerned and watching this BA4 and BA5 variant as you know, it has become the dominant variant across the U.S. Here in Hawaii, the last variant report, it's about 20% of the COVID cases. Now, those reports are a couple weeks lag because genomic sequencing and getting all the details about which variants we're seeing, it takes a while, but we do anticipate that BA4 and BA5 will lead to increase in cases. It has led to increase in cases in Japan, in Europe. So we do anticipate that it will mean more. Right now, Ryan, in our hospitals are busy with non-COVID patients. They are pretty much full. The number of COVID cases has remained relatively stable. Where this morning when I checked, we were at 160 COVID patients in our hospitals, which is really a manageable number. But our hospitals are full with normal patients.
You did mention boosters, or no, not boosters, excuse me, vaccinations for kids over the age of 6 months. We had Dr. Todd Allen from the Queen's Health Systems on here on Monday, and he was saying that unfortunately they are disappointed in that they're not seeing the vast uptake in those vaccines. The rush of parents coming in is really not what they would like it to be. Is the state going to do anything to further encourage this other than the messaging that you're giving us today and sort of, spreading the word? Is there going to be any active effort to try to encourage parents to get these kids vaccinated, especially before the start of school?
Yes, Yanji, we will continue to emphasize, especially for the younger children who just recently became eligible. We are seeing, Yanji, as you just look across the state, that the awareness and concern with COVID has kind of dropped. I know that when I go to many places, oftentimes I'm one of the few people who continue to wear a mask in crowds, just because I know that it makes a difference. So we are going to promote and focus on children getting vaccinated. We continue to work with the pediatricians and trying to encourage them. The pharmaceutical companies have repackaged the vaccine so that it is able to be stable in a doctor's office without the extreme cold refrigeration and all of those kinds of activities. So it's a lot easier to be able to receive and administer vaccines in a physician's office. So we continue to work with all the doctors and encouraging them to be able to vaccinate in their offices. And we will continue the messaging. It's really important. It makes a huge difference. People who are vaccinated typically will see very mild cases of COVID. And we anticipate that will be the same even with the variants that are coming.
I want to switch gears here and talk about some of the veto measures that have come across your desk and that you have notified the legislature with. But I want to start off with the overall budget as a whole. You had to make some adjustments to the budget that the legislature approved due to overspending by, I believe it was close to $104 million. Can you talk to us about how this miscalculation happened, and also what are some of those items that you had to make that decision to to take that funding back, and how you arrived at the decisions for some of those allocations?
Yeah, Ryan, just a couple things that, yes, we had more appropriations for federal funds than we had federal funds available. And that was a problem, as you had noted, $104 million more appropriated than we actually had. The process for the federal funds is complex. I have the authority to make appropriations, and we've done, especially for emergency considerations, or if the legislature is out of session, then I do have that authority to make those appropriations. We tried and shared the information as best as we can, but we continue to make decisions about moving federal money from one priority to another as necessary. In addition, the legislature had appropriated $300 million for the broadband effort. I think we all agree that we want to get broadband connectivity and fiber to all of the major islands. And we want to make that investment. It's a once in a generational investment that can make a difference for our community. But they also appropriated general fund support for the HTA, and that bill was clearly a gut and replace activity. The final language of the bill in conference had nothing to do with any previous drafts, and I really felt that we would put HTA at risk by allowing it to become law and then taking the chance that someone would challenge that appropriation. And so I did have to veto that measure. So, we continue to make sure that we can meet the maintenance of effort requirements, because of the appropriations to the Hawaiian Homes Commission, because of the appropriations for the Kalima settlement. There was huge non-education funding in this past session, which put the maintenance of effort requirements just out of sync with the rest of the budget. So, Ryan, it was really busy. There were a lot of bills in play at the very end of session. People were making and wanting to support programs that are important. I think we all agree. And so it was, I think the legislature lost track of funding explicitly as they kind of finished their work.
I want to ask you just about the economy overall and how you feel from the state's perspective things are going. I think, on the kind of granular level, people see the gas prices rising, although in recent weeks it's gone down just a bit. But that said, inflation is very real and prices seem to be going up. At the same time, you have the legislature dealing with a huge surplus and spending quite a bit of money. There seems to be, just tell us a little bit about how you feel about the state's overall economic health. And add to that, Lieutenant Governor Josh Green, in some of the debates that he's been on in his push for governor, has been calling for a pause on the gas tax. Is that something that you're at all considering?
Yeah, just a couple of things about that in general. I'll start with the gas tax. We had done some of the calculations, and on typical, if you just look at the typical driver, suspending the state gas tax would save them $6 a month. And and I would argue, yes, that every bit that we can help people save money would be helpful. But there's no guarantee that that if we suspend the gas tax, that the gasoline sales would actually pass that on to the consumer. There's no way for us to do that, and there's no commitment by the industry to do that. So, and we definitely need the money to repair our roads and highways. As you know, we are dealing with climate change and have to make significant investment to keep our roadways prepared. So I think that's why a short-term 3 months, $6 a month is $18. We are returning more in our rebates to all of residents, taxpayers, than we would ever see in savings from a suspension of the gas tax. And I think that just is more direct money in the pocket to the consumers. Yunji, our economy overall is recovered a lot quicker than anyone had anticipated. I just got the report from the Department of Taxation, and general fund growth was just under 30% last fiscal year. And I do know that 2021 was, a COVID year, and the economy was struggling. But I've never seen a 30% growth in general fund revenues in 1 year for the 30 years that I've been involved in state government. So it's a huge recovery. And I really am optimistic. We've been working to increase travelers from Japan. We know that they are slowly increasing. Japanese government is very methodical about how they want to increase international travel into Japan and international travel out of Japan. But we are seeing increased flights. Japan Airlines, ANA, increased flights. We restored the Flying Honu, the Airbus A380 that brings in up to 500 passengers per flight. And we are seeing improvements in that area. So I'm very optimistic that our economy will continue to improve through the end of the year.
Another veto that I wanted to, just to have you address was HB 2424, which was related to child welfare services. It was a bill that called for maybe stricter and more enhanced, monitoring of families that enter agree to this foster relationship. Your thoughts and your reasons behind vetoing this measure, and an explanation into why some of those stricter guidelines that were put up in this bill was something that you did not agree with.
Yeah, Ryan, that House Bill 2424 was probably the hardest veto I had to deal with. I mean, I think we all saw the tragedy in Waimanalo and wanted to take action. At the end of the day, when I looked at the bill, it was poorly drafted. It expanded investigations to those who agreed to provide support and a home for foster parents, but it clearly ended up violating the constitutional rights of essentially parents who agreed to become foster parents, or parents who agreed to adopt foster parents, and it would make them subject to review and investigation, for the entire time that they're dealing with minor children, which clearly was unconstitutional overreach of authority. I think that was the most troubling part of the bill. We did support increased resources. We supported efforts to help us fill vacancies. We supported the other parts of the bill, but I clearly could not ignore the fact that increasing investigations that could potentially violate constitutional rights of good people who agree to become foster parents or agree to ultimately adopt children, subject to investigation and inspection, and was definitely, I think, a bridge too far.
I want to ask you about Red Hill. Since the last time we talked, the Navy released their own investigation into what happened with the initial spill, and also a timeline in terms of how quickly they plan to drain the tanks. Right now, that timeline's set to the end of 2024. What have your conversations been like with the Navy about their investigation, and also what are your thoughts on this timeline?
We are definitely looking at the timeline, Yunji. I think we all agree that we would like for it to be as quick as possible, but with the safety and protecting of the water resource. So I think that's the balance. As you know, the report identified a number of investments and improvements that they feel is very critical to ensure that the system can operate safely without putting at risk the aquifer. And we want to make sure that we can implement those before we start defueling. So, I mean, I think overall we thought that the plan was complete and comprehensive. Obviously, we are wanting to see the details. We want to be able to see how we might be able to accelerate the defueling if possible, but only if we can do it in a safe way.
Expanding on that, one of the other things that was really alarming about this was just learning new information for the first time that was made public, as well as seeing that video that was released of the actual spill itself. And there has just been a broken trust with the military over time through this ordeal and through this situation, and with the Navy. Wanting to get your take on just the overall transparency with the state and with the people by the U.S. military and the Navy regarding this matter, and how you feel the relations are right now, especially after learning all of the new information that was revealed in that report?
I think the most shocking thing, Ryan, is that release of that video, because we had asked to see video of the leaks in the past. They assured us, or they told us, that no video was available, that the cameras were not operating at that point in time. So I was very surprised. Relationships had improved, I would say, over the last several weeks. But then again, we get this report, and there's more information. There's a video that we were assured did not exist, and yet it appears. And so, there definitely is a lot more work that will be required by the Navy to restore trust between the federal government and the state government, and also between the Navy and the general public. People are very, very skeptical, and there's just a lot of belief that there is more information that is being hidden and not shared with the state or the general public, which is just appalling.
I want to ask you, we're a month away from primary day. I'm curious, just as a voter, if you've made up your mind who you're voting for governor in the primary. You don't have to tell us who, of course. And also wondering if you've been watching any of these debates and tracking the races, not just the one to replace your job, but also the other races, because there are so many.
I have to admit that I haven't been watching all the debates, but I've heard that you guys probably had the best one so far. So my hat's off to you. I'm glad that there is more opportunities for the people to see the candidates side by side. I really do think it's important. It's important that they, in public, be able to respond to the questions and issues that are of most concern to the people. And I'm glad that there are more and more opportunities for that to happen. I haven't made a decision, and I certainly hope to see more and hear more from the candidates about the issues that they think are most important. And I think what the public wants to hear is how they would respond, right? What would they do to deal with the most pressing challenges that we have as a community?
Well, you've been in this role for now 8 years. Time has flown by, but I want you to maybe think back to those first couple of months, or maybe in the first day coming into office, and you stepping into this role. What piece of advice would you give to the person that's going to take your spot about something that they may not realize that you had to learn on the job over the past 8 years? What piece of advice would you give them, or maybe something that they may not know about them?
Ryan, I think back to, I went to the new governor seminar 2 weeks after the election up in Colorado. And I just still remember the thing that I took from that seminar was the fact that you have to be prepared for an emergency, a natural disaster, or something that requires emergency action from the hour that you become governor. And it is about what that responsibility is. When I look at it, and just talking to staff, we've dealt with 39 nationally declared disasters since I've become governor. And I don't know what that record is, but certainly it seems like it's more than any other governor had to deal with. And it's tough in an emergency situation because it's not about being popular. It is about taking the actions that's necessary to keep our community safe. And that oftentimes is not the thing that makes you most popular, but it definitely is the thing that needs to be done.
You did make mention of Japan earlier in the conversation. Hawaii has had a special relationship with Japan for many years. And I just wanted to get your reflections on Shinzo Abe, the former prime minister, who was killed recently. I know that he had visited Hawaii and you'd spent time together. Just would like to get your reflections on him before we let you go this morning.
Sure. Thanks, Yunji. Thanks for asking me that question. Don and I just was shocked to hear that he was assassinated. We've traveled to Japan. We feel safe traveling to Japan. Its security has never been an issue, and to see the video and to know that the former prime minister was assassinated was just shocking. Um, I really appreciated Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He was a true friend of Hawaii. He had fond memories of growing up in Hawaii, and he visited, not growing up in Hawaii, but he did visit. He kind of knew the history. We had Ganemono, where we celebrated the 150th anniversary of immigration from Japan during his time. We worked on reconciliation. We recognized that the Hawaii-Japan relationship is foundational to the U.S.-Japan relationship. And there's no other sister state or activity in the United States that is as close to our relationship with Japan. It's more than friendship, it's more than business. It really is about family. And Prime Minister Abe, I just remember when he visited Hawaii, he was so full of energy. He wanted the opportunity to engage the public. And when we had the reception for him at the convention center, he insisted on visiting every single table, engaging those who came, taking a picture with them, and he refused to leave until he was able to do that with each and every person there. And that's just, he's a world leader committed to the people of Hawaii. And it was just so impressive to see that. Hawaii has lost a true friend. He epitomized the aloha spirit, advocated for peace and reconciliation between the US and Japan. And most importantly, he took the time to visit and gave that speech at Pearl Harbor that I think truly represented reconciliation between Japan and the United States.
Well, thank you for sharing those thoughts and those insights. Before we let you go, as you near the end of your term here, what does the next few months look like for you? Is there anything specifically that you're going to be focused on that you want to make sure that you're able to accomplish before you leave? Any special projects or anything in particular that you want to dedicate these final months in office to?
Well, a couple of things, Ryan. Homelessness continues to be a challenge. I'm glad that we did not suffer drawbacks as greatly as anticipated or expected. We are on track, so we want to get the Ohana zones and the homeless programs restarted and re-engaged and really drive down the homeless issue. There are a number of affordable rental projects that we are finishing up that, I'm glad that we'll be able to finish before the end of the year. And it really is about sustainability and fighting the climate crisis. We want to move forward with the transformation of our energy systems. We're getting ready to shut down the coal plant. Hawaii will be one of the first states to get off of coal completely. And there are a number of renewable energy projects that are in process that we want to see completed. So overall, I think it'll be a very, very busy 5 months, but I'm excited about finishing some of these projects.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's the top of the hour, so we have to let you go, but we appreciate your time as always, and we hope to see you again soon.
Aloha.
Thank you. Aloha.
Great to hear from Governor Ige, and we did touch on a number of topics. If you missed any part of this conversation, remember you can always catch it as a podcast or watch the rebroadcast online or on Channel 50 later today. Ryan, we started off that conversation talking about the changes that the DOE announced August 1st. Masks are optional indoors. The governor, of course, saying that it is a matter now of parental choice. And for those parents who are concerned, he still recommends having children wear a mask if that is something that they think is important.
Yeah, and we also heard that they continue to track, of course, the numbers, aware of the threats of the BA.5 variant, and continuing in his encouragement to those out there to get boosters and to really make sure that you are masking up in situations where there may be a lot of people. The same type of messaging that we've heard all throughout the pandemic. The governor continuing to echo those statements here as we see this variant spread. We also heard about some of those veto items that he intends to veto, his explanation for some of it, but also noting that the state is in a good place financially with what we're seeing with the tax revenue that has come into the state, and overall just the ability for the state to move and fund some of the programs that have been put on the back burner for some time now, and elevating and escalating that process in order to see that some of these projects are finally able to come to fruition.
Yeah, amazing to hear that, year over year, 30% increase in general fund revenue. He said he's never seen that. Of course, 2020 was a particular low, but even that said, it's higher than they had expected. And they're very pleased to see that, because obviously they can do more of their initiatives if they have more money to work with. He also talked about Red Hill and the Navy, citing specifically that video that was recently released showing the fuel just gushing throughout that system, and his disappointment in the fact that the Navy had initially said that there was no video. Obviously, some video does exist because we've now all seen it. And so that just continues some of the mistrust between the state government and the Navy.
Yeah, we also got to hear his thoughts on, of course, Prime Minister Abe and his final thoughts as he enters his final months in office, and also noting that he hasn't made up his mind on who he's voting for governor. So
I think that was more tactful than truthful. I gotta say, we'll
well,
see, but
we'll
he's
see.
got to walk a fine line on that. But interesting, he thinks that there's a lot of choice, and he did appreciate that. So we had to ask, even
Yeah,
if
we
we
had
didn't
to.
expect a response. On Friday, we are turning our attention, Ryan, to long COVID with Dr. Dominic Chow.
Yeah, looking forward to that conversation to learn more about the effects of long COVID and its impact on some of the members of our population here in Hawaii specifically, and what those individuals are dealing with. We're taking a deep dive into learning a little bit more from someone who is considered a specialist in this area, and looking forward to that conversation on Friday. We hope to see you then right back here for another episode of Spotlight Hawaii. Aloha.
Aloha.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.